Uh, Hello, all right. Let's do a roll call for our special meeting. So Larry Dunn, Chair.
Ray Rafferty, Vice Chair.
Michelle Fitzpatrick, Secretary.
Tom Olson, member.
Ann?
Ann Schmidt, member.
All right, so missing is Kristen, but we have a quorum, so we will move forward. Approval of minutes. Do we have any minutes outstanding, Bruce?
Not for this meeting. No, the only minutes outstanding are from September meeting, but they'll be ready next month.
All right. And I don't see anyone from the public.
No.
So that's correct. And items of business. So we have the proposed open space ordinance and the open space stewardship document. Those are the two line items that are teed up for this meeting. And unfortunately, my Adobe doesn't seem to want.
Larry, I have them both in the original Word document if you want me to share those.
Yep. So I'm not sure why. All right, so it looks like my Adobe program is dead. All right. You want to start with the ordinance? That's a smaller document.
You should see it now.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Now, Tom, I think I sent you my comments, even though I can't.
Well, I saw your comments per se. I didn't change anything in the wording. I think there were more comments rather than corrections or changes.
Well, maybe there were questions, but okay. All right, you want to take us through this?
Well, I can bring those up if you want me to. If you want your, do you want me to go through your comments first?
No, let's just
Okay.
go through, and I'll still see if I can bring that up because it was a Word document, so I don't know why I can't bring that up.
I noticed that Kristen's here now also.
Hello, people.
Let the record show, Bruce.
I couldn't find the proper link. I found it.
Okay. And we're just starting right now and looking at I'm sharing the proposed draft ordinance, and so we're just starting that. Okay, again, like I said before, the document is structured identical to the town of Cheshire, Connecticut. I did update it for the obvious changes that I could see. One is where I would put it into the Groton ordinances. It would be in chapter 12 and in section 12.2. And these would, in the format though, for this the subsections would all is identical to what Cheshire had. So that's how this is organized. And just following their, because they're using the standard ordinances for the state of Connecticut also. So that's I didn't try to retool anything or rewrite anything in those areas. I did recognize in the purpose here, our town of Groton, as opposed to what the town of Cheshire uses, is for the plan of conservation and development. Zoning regulations and everything else was the same as in Cheshire's. Likewise, residents and non-residents may be permitted to use a particular parcel only in conditions of this ordinance and for regulations set forth. Now, going back and taking a look at this as I've done some discussions with some folks and a little bit more research, the one thing we have to kind of consider in the big picture, in my view, is the applicability of park regulations in conjunction with open space. And so what I'm seeing here is maybe we need to have in our definitions, in addition to what's the Cheshire people had, is that a more clear definition between things that are run by the Parks Department and then everything else that's left over, which is really why we're here in taking consideration of this, because what we're seeing is that there's properties and parcels in the town that are not being controlled by Parks and Rec. And as such, they're just laying vacant open space, such as the Boulder Heights area, the Joel property, the Birch Plain Creek area, and some other parcels in the town. And that's why those are kind of called out in the open space management plan. I identified 5 different locations in the town, but that's, and maybe we need to define those better in these definitions as far as areas of the town that these would only be, that these regulations would be applicable to, or we need to work with the Parks and Recs people to get a clear understanding that these regulations affect open space that is under the control of Parks and Recs, and as well as all that is not assigned to them at this time. And so I haven't heard, I know that Larry had provided these regulations to Parks and Recs, but I don't know if we've heard any kind of comments back from them.
I got a thank you, looks good, but I didn't get anything, certainly anything back in writing.
Because I know that they had expressed an interest in these as they're going through their master plan and stuff. And I don't know where that stands right now. I know that they had their public outbrief of the surveys stuff, but I haven't heard what they're doing next as far as on expansion. Because it could just be as easily, you know, that they would take these in consideration and take on all of the open space in the town as Parks and Recs, or they could be, you know, walking away from some stuff too and leaving an area here. So that's what kind of, you know, why I felt we need to at least have a discussion here. And this is one area that I didn't know how to put that in there relative to what areas that are in here. But right now, the way this is written is for anything in the town as such. So, but I think this is one area that we need to get better clarification working with the other folks. Michelle?
There's that email at the end of our package from Mark Berry. It doesn't say a lot, but it looks like he at least gave some feedback. Just about if there's not a steward, that Parks and Recs gives the permissions. And there's a couple other things in there in that email. But it doesn't address all the things you just talked about, Tom.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is that they're yeah.
Maybe we need to send a specific request saying, here's the questions we need answered.
Well, the first time we sent it to him, it was he asked from us, right? Where I identified, oh, we had one, and he said we needed one. Could you send me it? So you're right. We didn't send it as a specific request that says here's our view, but then we never agreed as a commission that this was our view. I mean, which is what today is.
Right.
So I think it's certainly appropriate after today to submit it with any changes that we come up with today, and then forward it and get feedback. So why don't we do that? And I'll put a to-do action item to get any feedback from Mark on the updated draft it'll be draft as of September 24th. All right. Okay. So did you want to go through it by section, Tom, or just ask?
That's what I was thinking. If we, talking to each of these individual sections, there's only 6 of them. So I thought that the thing's pretty comprehensive. I don't know what to do with Bruce's, I mean, with the Mark Berry comments here. I did not try to change those, even though they were dated the 14th. I didn't recognize that we had received those. So they're not reflected in here.
Well, we can address them as
Yeah.
we go through it, as we get to the section. So maybe the question would be is, section 12.2.2, are there any comments from anyone?
Yeah.
Hey, may I make a couple of comments?
Sure.
First on the section where we are right now, and you have a variety of definitions for different things. Why do we have two different definitions for motor vehicles?
What do you mean by two different?
You have number E, motor vehicle, and then at the end, number, I think M, you have vehicle.
That's a good question. I don't know why why the Cheshire, I didn't touch any of this. This is all straight from Cheshire. I didn't try to develop this, so I can't tell you why it's this way, other than they're citing two different Connecticut state statutes relative to vehicles.
Right. And
I did not research those, and I can take an action to go research what the differences are between those two, so you can have a better understanding. But I
What
never.
just without getting too technical or long-winded, for instance, I didn't realize that a bicycle has been defined in the state statutes. But apparently it has, and I didn't know there was any question about what a bicycle is. So, I wondered why that was, in amongst the list. It's as though somebody went to the state statutes and said, okay, what is listed there and what's not, and we're going to include that which is. So just to shorten the document a little bit, I think I would suggest motor vehicle, certainly you're including ATVs, snowmobiles, and so forth. Maybe you can just say vehicles and be done with that. So I have a question on that. And then if you go down to K, you would please
Sure.
scroll down.
Next page.
Steward means individual defined, responsible administration and management of open space lands under the jurisdiction of Parks and Rec or Conservation Commission. Is that and or between the Parks and Rec and Conservation?
This is an area that, and I think this is one of the comments that Mark was making as far as on what's the terms and who's the steward. This is where the steward's the guy that's basically administrating as far as for giving permission to do things on open space lands. I envision this person as a paid staff employee. And as such, it probably most likely would be in the Parks and Rec department, and would be, and because we don't have any controlled staff from conservation, and I'd say we probably can delete the Conservation Commission from this aspect. But again, I did not try to minimize how much changes I did in here other than changing.
That's fine. So are we agreement to delete Conservation Commission from K?
Sure.
All right, hearing no dissent, then Tom, I think.
Okay. We'll take that out.
We backtrack before we go too far ahead.
Sure.
Back to the bicycle question,
Sure.
because Bray was making a few points, but before we forget it, there's a lot of, maybe we should look into what that definition of a bicycle is, because there's hybrid bicycles now. There's actual bicycles, little electric assists. So is that a motor vehicle or a bicycle? So maybe they have it defined in there for that reason, because there's some clear definition, that they have to have, like no motor assist. Anyway, I just thought I'd make that point.
Yeah, I assume that's in the question of motor vehicle versus bicycle. So in the context of open space, I think there can't be any motor of any kind, whether gas powered, electric powered, et cetera, et cetera. I'm hoping, and Tom said he'd double check it, but that's why those are in there, to make sure that it limits it to human powered bicycles, right?
Can I make one statement? Years ago, I was around when they were putting together the regulations for Bluff Point. And the discussion came up about what sort of activity can go on other than walking. And the bicycle came up. And it said that if you cannot have a gas-powered vehicle or bicycle. So back then, things, bikes have evolved since that point in time. But that's my sort of reference point of what came out. What they were trying to do is to keep any gasoline-powered, like little scooters, dirt bikes, things like that, to keep them out. But allowing bicycles, and if a person is handicapped, for instance, in some way, let's say an electric bicycle might be an assist for them. And I don't know if we're necessarily excluding them, for this chance to do it. But that's sort of from where I'm coming. And then they said, well, if you had a solar powered four-wheel vehicle or something like that, you could do it. Well, back then, Tesla wasn't around.
Yeah. So that's why I'm saying I would say no, that we don't want that. But
Yeah. There's the Merritt property that's over here by the top of Fort Hill. There are people, when I've been out there, that ride their bikes through there all the time. And they're, of course, mountain bikes as they go through. I have not seen anybody with an assist bike anywhere.
I have seen guys with an electric assist bike at both Bluff Point, Haley Farm, and on the Merritt, taking that whole Tri-Town Trail with an electric assist bicycle.
Right.
all right, so I think the point of this discussion is we need to clarify that we want the minimum possible definition to limit it to human powered. And I think obviously the state statutes on disabilities would override whatever we put in here anyway. So I'm less worried about that. All right, other comments on the definition section?
If you could go down to, let's see, okay. I'm trying to wrap my head around this whole concept of steward, because as Tom pointed out, it's a new position. In order to do the job that the ordinance and what was our other subject other we're going to talk about tonight. But anyway, it all wraps around the steward, and we should have the ability to maybe have some input about the role of this person and work with this person. But it's going to be someone who is going to get paid and would have to fall underneath some department, and that would be logically would be a director of Parks and Recreation. If we were in the town of Greenwich, hiring somebody right now would probably not be an issue. But this is the town of Groton who doesn't have the budget.
Yeah, well, that's under 12.2.3. And secondly, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a new paid position. It could be an added responsibility to an existing position. I don't think we should determine that. I think that's the next round when we get to Parks and Recs and this goes up through the process.
Well, when I read through some of the other plans that you have here, the management plans, you got some pretty involved stuff. And in order to make this a working document, you're going to need somebody who's going to oversee all sorts of volunteer groups, who's going to oversee educational programs. There's a lot that coming out of ideas and feet on the ground coming out of these ordinances and the management plans. So this is going to be somebody that I think is starting off realistically. Yeah, I think it'll be just somebody assigned in Parks and Rec, and we go from there and then see what happens.
Yeah.
Ray, how does that change the definition?
It doesn't really change it. I'm just feeling that with the management plans, as we go through different properties, the problem is the management plan, we're hoping are active plans where actually people are going to be walking through and or volunteers or whatever to be monitoring this. And I use Pequot Woods because I'm familiar with that, because there is a board and there is an internal management plan for the woods that we work directly with the Parks and Rec. But Parks and Rec Stewart, if you would, any problems, any concerns we have with this group, it goes right to Mark. There isn't somebody below him who we work with.
Well, I think that's a mechanical implementation, which is not a bad one, which is there's volunteer groups or others that work with Parks and Recs, but I don't think that's something that's in the ordinance per se. That's how the Parks and Recs execute it, you know, and it's
Right.
either a full position, it's a part-time position, it's a position that enlists volunteers or sets up a separate commission for every park, which is actually not a bad thought, but I don't think that should be in here. I think
Oh,
you get the Parks and Recs.
I'm not suggesting this, but I'm just saying we're loading up a position of overseeing all the goals that we have here. And it's going to be somebody who's going to be busy doing a lot of this.
Okay,
Year round.
that's fine. That's why we're
I'm
doing
still
it.
trying to understand, should we be adjusting I mean, right now we're just talking about what the definition is, right? So,
Right.
so do we need to change the definition of what the steward is?
I don't know at this point, because as we go into the management plan and we look at
Okay.
actually, or the, in my notes, we look at the stewardship plan. The second item we're going to talk about tonight is the stewardship plan. As we get through all that, and then that will give Mark Berry, head of Parks and Rec, a much better idea of what our wishes are going forward with all these suggestions.
All right, so let's keep moving along. Any comments on 12-2-3? Going once,
Should I
going
take the
twice.
Conservation Commission out of this also in section A right in here?
Well, this one's a little different though, Tom. This one, earlier in discussion, we said that whoever the steward is, does the Conservation Commission have a role in the selection of that person? The one above it just means that's the steward.
Right.
So I think there's two different things.
Okay, I'm just asking this.
Oh, no, I mean, that's what I was saying. Does anyone, I mean, this is one of those things that we can ask and they may say, he ain't getting it. But I don't see a problem with us asking for it. And they can,
I like the idea of having input on whoever is going to be in charge of all of this.
Yep.
Now we might not have veto power, but we might have, they might just say, hey, what do you think about this person? And we say, oh yeah, looks like a good person.
Well, then
Not
the
like-
question is, from my viewpoint, is if we're asking the town, we get the town manager, the Conservation Commission, should we also have the Parks and Rec Commission in here then?
well, it says appointed by the Director of Parks and Rec.
That's
So,
on the staff side. So the staff person is making the appointment to his subordinate staff person, but the approval, should it be just the town manager and the Conservation Commission, or should he go back to the town manager, the Conservation Commission, and the Parks and Recs Commission.
If you're, I'm just thinking how Congress, if you appoint someone, you don't go back afterwards and then reapprove them. I mean, if they're not approved, then the director of Parks and Recs can either argue it, I guess, or go back and pick somebody else. I don't think it needs a secondary approval. I think it's assumed.
It's okay. So maybe for me, this is Michelle speaking. It would be the Parks and Rec would say, I want to appoint this person.
Right.
Then we would give our opinion, and then they would actually appoint them. So I would assume they'd be pre-selecting anyway. Not like we're
Right.
going to force somebody on them, but they're going to pre-select and have us approve it. Is how I think it would work.
Well, that's what it says.
I think you're missing a point here.
Okay.
The staff guy, the director of the Parks and Recs is staff, okay, paid staff. And he can go out and solicit for bodies as long as he has budget, okay? Or take his own staff and reassign them additional duties, okay? Now, the final approval of that would be done through the town manager and the Conservation Commission, but should the director of the Parks and Recs be going back to the Parks and Rec Commission to make sure that he's operating his staff as in concert with the direction of his normally oversighting commission.
Oh,
We are
okay.
not normally oversighting the Parks and Recs people. There's a Parks and Recs Commission that provides oversight of the director of the Parks and Recs department.
All right.
There is?
This is Bray. I would leave out the Park and Rec Commission at this point and not get them involved, and let the Mark Barry as head staff go through this and think if he needs the approval coming from his commission, and then he can put it in there. But I would let him give him the option of being able to do it.
Sounds fine. I just wanted to bring that point up.
So, and also the prior approval shall be appointed by the Parks and Rec Commission, something like with the town manager and Conservation Commission, and not necessarily having us doing it at first, because we don't know. Parks and Recs is the one who's going to have to work with this, and so it should be coming from they should be first.
So what terminology would you replace it with?
Just take out with the private prior approval.
With just approval,
Yes.
yeah, just get rid of the word prior, okay?
Sorry, other comments? All right, 1224. I know you have some red there. I also have a comment.
Okay,
My comment was to add to it a reference to the open space stewardship plan template. I think later I kind of changed the word to workbook. But I was thinking it should be tied to, I think, earlier discussions about what are we talking about? What is an appropriate stewardship plan? So it's not, I'm not saying put it in here. I'm just saying there should be a reference, says a management plan for each parcel shall be proposed. And I'm suggesting that in conformance with the Conservation Commission's open space stewardship outline or template, something to that effect.
I would argue against that from the aspect that this is an ordinance and we want to still have sufficient flexibility by, and if we change things or whatever, I mean, we have a final approval on the thing. And so we can influence, what we're expecting in the output of it by saying, here's how it's giving to the Parks and Recs people, here's the template that we're kind of expecting, but not mandating that as part of the ordinance to maintain flexibility.
Well,
I
I
would-
kind of want to give some credence and weight to whatever stewardship plan we come up with, rather than, I guess, coming back and making comments and approvals. I don't know, other comments out there, guys?
I have a comment at the end of section A, where it says Parks and Rec. I would leave off commission and just leave it as Parks and Recreation.
Probably get rid of the then to go with it, just in Parks and Recreation, right? Yeah.
I guess I was asking for any opinions on Tom versus Larry's view of referencing
The details of a template of a management plan.
yeah. So nobody has a view one way or another.
I'd like this is Anne. I think having it less specific in the ordinance, I agree with Tom, that would give us more flexibility going forward.
Anyone else? All right,
Second that.
I won't push for that additional detail. Okay, other comments on 1224?
Section B, right, the very first sentence, a management plan for each parcel shall be proposed by Parks and Rec and not the Conservation Commission. I thought we were doing the stewardship plans.
Well, that's the second discussion. I was going to recommend we provide the template for a stewardship plan that Parks and Recs writes, and then approve it once they do it, rather than us create the plan itself.
And that's why to go execute these words, that's what you would be doing. You'd have a management plan for each parcel. We have a stewardship plan that would cover us the process, and then Parks and Rec would develop a management plan for each parcel. So it would be parcel specific as far as what the management plan is. Whether like you already have COP and Pequot Woods already have commissions in place and stuff. But for these other properties where there's nothing right now, we would be developing a parcel-specific plan that would be done by Parks and Recs. They would get reviewed to make sure we're in conformance with everything, and then they would be brought to us as the approval for the final approval.
But somewhere in here, can you somehow pull out that the management plan is actually from a stewardship plan?
No, that goes back to the flexibility I talked about earlier. We as the commission saying as the final approval, we have a process that we've developed, which would be our stewardship plan with a template embedded into it that's on the shelf that we can give to the Parks and Rec people. Says, well, here's what we expect to be if you follow this, we'll approve it.
Well, I think, Bray, are you saying change the word management plan to stewardship plan?
No.
Again, the reason it says management plan in there is that's what came from Cheshire.
I guess the way it's been worded, it sounds like the stewardship plan, the management plan, from what Tom is saying, is an outgrowth of the stewardship plan.
Right.
So one of the things that, for instance, that will be addressed by the Parks and Rec to the Conservation Commission is, for instance, we'll go back to the Joel property that Tom has been interested in recently. There's nothing going on there, and I totally agree with him. Well, the Parks and Rec is going to say, what would you guys like to do with it? Would you like a trail through it? No trail? We've always talked about a connection between the Joel property and the new Sparkle Lake property, the Spicer property, somehow across the back of the old golf course. So there are inputs that we can give to this that then would flow into some sort of a management plan from their end. So that's how I'm sort of envisioning how this goes, and I don't think this quite says that. I understand the management plan for each parcel will be proposed by Parks and Rec. In other words, what can they do and what they can't do? How much time can they devote to the trail maintenance on top of everything else? I can understand that. And we would be working closely with them and developing particular strategies for each property, because I'm assuming we're going to get out on and walk these properties and see what they're made up of and make proposals or say things are going really great, or you know, we could add some additional things to it. And it's a changing document. It's ongoing depending upon different events that may crop up in the future that we don't see it right now, but it gives us that flexibility.
So do you have a proposed verbiage change, Ray?
I don't. I was more of approaching you guys and just speaking up just to see how you folks felt, that if you were really liked what was down there and everybody said, let's go with it, and then I would go along. But I haven't looked at it to say how I would change it, because I'm trying to get a feel for how these the stewardship plan develops and then how to incorporate that in the ordinance.
Well, I think it's critical, you know, one of the key factors that I see here is that by having a parcel specific management plan, okay, it kind of constrains everything in what we're talking about, and that we can be working with one parcel at a time. Obviously, if we're the approval, it'd be reasonable for them to come to us to get, you know, we can provide, you know, we can be proactive by providing, here's our template, here's what we envision with that, and then let them go see how, like Bray said, it brings up a lot of good points relative to what are their what resource constraints do they are going to apply to that particular property. And we can negotiate from there.
One thing I might propose is the management plan from somehow, this is redundant, but the management plan from the stewardship plan, in a sense, for each parcel proposed by the director.
Well, nowhere in here, see, the stewardship plan is not a reference document at this time. So putting in, trying to put something that doesn't technically exist into an ordinance, that's why I kind of say you need to have flexibility here in regard to, and I look at the stewardship plan that we as the Conservation Commission will be putting on the shelf as something that we generate as a guidance document to how we operate as a commission. It's not legislation to the Parks and Rec per se. It's how we're going to approve things.
Yeah, well, we had that discussion earlier, and the agreement was not to reference the stewardship plan.
Yeah.
So I think we need to move forward since we've made that call. Anything else on 224?
This is Ann, just for clarification, you have that the management plan will be proposed by the director. Is that he could delegate to the steward to do that? Because I guess I would have thought that the steward would have been.
Well, we said earlier that the steward works for the steward shall be under the directional control and directly responsible to the director of Parks and Rec for performance of his duties. So it would be logical for the part, but we want his the
boss to have
to take a look at it.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's fine. Just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
Yeah. And there was one other section to this is the E.
Yeah, same comment there.
Should we not have like he, she, or S/HE to be a little more
Thank
current?
you, Kristen. That just caught my eye too.
Yep. And I mean, Tom's saying he, that's a matter of habit, but you know.
I'm just going by how this was written. I did not.
Okay,
I
okay.
don't
well,
know
I'm
what the
saying we
town's
should amend it.
policy is on gender neutrality.
I
But
agree.
I'll
I
let
think
the
this is
lawyers
Michelle,
worry about
be
that.
gender neutral.
All right, I am okay with updating the document in general, be gender neutral.
What you can
Okay.
do is just go to the very tippity top and do a search find for HE and replace with S/HE.
But careful, then you replace THE with,
No, if it's just HE.
no, it doesn't work. It'll pick out
No, it's-
every.
You gotta
Everything-
look at each one.
Don't worry,
you gotta look at each one.
All right,
Yeah.
let's leave the mechanics.
There's
Okay,
also, oh, sorry. There's also in 12-2-3, the performance of his duties. Their duties, I guess, or.
No, we already
And sometimes you
agreed.
can leave it out. A lot of times you don't even need the pronoun at all. It's working to
duties.
get around it.
Or the
All right,
performance of
we've all
duties.
agreed to make it general neutral,
Yeah.
so let's leave that as a
Okay.
to-do. All right, keep going.
Okay, moving on then to open space. These are the rules and regulations. There's quite a number of these.
I've got a comment on E.
E is right here.
Yeah. Entry and exit. What's not there is anything doing with parking and or access. It just says shall be established, enter, or exist as set forth in the management plan. I'm trying to, maybe that's in the plan itself, in terms of how many parking slots, or is it handicapped, accessible, etc. Any comments on that?
Here again, I think you're getting too specific because unless we're trying to put a regulation in relative to, all we're trying to say is that entry, we don't want, we're going to assume that there's an invisible fence around the place and the only place you can get in and out is at the gates.
Yeah, this is Michelle. Plus, this is for what other people are supposed to do, not what for Parks and Rec is supposed to do, right? If you put in parking lots, you're telling Parks and Rec what they have to do. This is about what other people can do.
I have a question about this one also, because I feel that whatever's down in print here is pretty much set in stone. And again, I'll go back to Pequot Woods. They designed a loop trail through the property and had exit points on several places along the loop trail. That was sort of set down as a map in place. And then senior development came in alongside the property and they said, can we have an entrance and exit to your trail system because our property line is within 20 feet of your trail? Can we come to the back of our property for our people to access the trails? And we said, sure. So another entranceway was added to it. And I've noticed along another part of the loop trail, there's been uses, most frequent uses becomes the entrance and exit for another neighborhood. So I'm just putting this in as it's a little bit fluid.
Yeah, but I think, Bray, I'm now kind of coming around to where it says that the plan determines entry and exit, and what you've said on that example is a modification to the plan, which goes through an amendment process, and in fact is approved by the appropriate body. So I think I'm now okay with E. It covers that use case.
I tend to agree with Larry on this also. I think
Yeah.
you give a good example in regard to how the things develop and that they need to go through a change in updating the management plan to reflect the new requests and the granted permissions.
Yeah, so change control in an earlier section, I think handles that question. All right, well, my next comment was on T.
You want to go down?
I don't know, unless somebody else has something.
I think I had something on K.
Okay, I can slide this back up here to K. K
Sorry.
categorize.
Some of the properties don't have receptacles, trash receptacles, and it's take in, take out your own stuff.
And I would say that this gives you flexibility relative to the management plan if you're going to establish. I'll just give you a good.
It says that.
It
That's the
doesn't
last
say that, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, Michelle. The one I'm looking at, it doesn't have that. I'm
Okay.
looking at the older version, so I don't know, Tom, if it changed.
I don't recall changing anything in this area.
It does say as provided, and if it's not available, you got to carry out.
Oh, no, I'm looking at, oh, it's fine. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong page. It's fine.
No problem.
Can I step back just one more to H?
Sure. To H, yeah.
What's the problem with metal detectors?
I'll give you the example that GOSA has a prohibition on metal detectors because they, for two reasons. One is that they see people going in and digging holes up there and not recovering the holes,
Right.
or they're taking historical stuff out of the property without permissions.
Like arrowheads and those kind of things.
Yeah.
That was my thought. It's there shouldn't be a reason to do metal detectors. Is prohibited. If somebody has a valid reason because they're a research team or something, then they can get approval to do same.
Right, and that'd be going through the steward.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving down to P was the next one that I heard.
I don't know. I had T.
Yeah, it'll be right here.
Yeah, I mean, I normally see under the control of, in terms of dogs, that some of the postings, certainly on state property, I'm trying to remember what the town has, does say under the control of the owner. So I think this might be more restrictive. I don't know, does anybody remember what that is today?
I don't know what's at the cop property, but dogs are off leash all the time. But
The cop property says under control of.
right, okay.
Well, that's state. I know Haley Farm is under the control of. Some properties say must be leashed at all times. So I think GOSA does that, Tom.
Yeah, they're on a leash all the time.
They're at least all the time. So I think I'm just saying is that from an ordinance point of view, those are kind of the two approaches. And I guess, I don't know, I was thinking of leash or under the control, but
it does open it up. And the reason that I think the town's going for that this is consistent with the town is that that's why you have the dog park areas that let them go on their own.
no, it's in the trails on the cop property, they specifically say under the control. Now that may be because it's a term or condition when they donated the land because they really wanted to support dogs. So there's a caveat that says, if there's a more restrictive condition or a less restrictive condition on a specific parcel, that's okay.
Then you should just change the wording to free roaming dogs are prohibited on all open space lands unless otherwise specified or something.
Yeah, Kristen,
I
you and
agree
I
there
are
shouldn't be
totally in
free-ranging
sync on it.
dogs.
That's the same phrasing I was thinking.
Mhm.
Or specified in the management plan, how dogs are,
Oh, there you go. I like that one. Yeah.
because that gives the flexibility back, if each property might be slightly different.
Well,
or
free
make a
roaming dogs,
statement.
I think, are prohibited. I'm not sure I've seen anything that says that in the cage dog park itself in fence, that's not free roaming. I mean, they are constrained by the fence. So I don't know of any place that has free roaming dogs allowed. But I agree with the comment that says the rest of it would be on a parcel by parcel basis in terms of leash restrictions, under control restrictions, etc.
Yeah, I would put, this is Michelle, I would put the under, unless otherwise restricted, whatever, I would put that in the dogs must be leash thing. So the dogs at all times unless otherwise allowed in the management plan or something.
Okay,
But
I know, I like, yep, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Okay, I will update some words there.
Okay, can we go get back to Q and just add a space after
Mhm.
period at the end of Q? There should be a space between Q and R.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you mean a line?
A line.
Yeah, just
Okay.
Like
insert.
that?
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
That I can do.
A grammaticist amongst us, okay.
That's easy, right?
Tom,
It's gotta look nice.
could you go back to P,
E,
P,
B?
P,
E.
Peter? We were just there. Keep going down.
Oh, go down?
Yes.
Which one are you going to?
Letter P, Peter.
Oh, P.
Oh,
Peter.
I thought you said E as well.
Yeah, I thought
I
you said
did
E.
too.
Sorry. So on this, what I'd like to add is second line where it says rockets or missiles at any fauna, that you also put in there or flora.
Oh, okay.
I think that's,
Flora.
yeah.
Okay, I'll get that spelling correct.
I think
It's
there's an O.
FLORA.
Yeah, there's an O in there.
Oh.
No A.
No way.
No way.
Laura, okay.
There.
There we go. And that's a good idea because of the poison. Except, well, yeah, when deemed necessary. If it's an invasive, they may deem it necessary to poison it, depending on what it is,
Well, I think that's permitted by the
It's the
steward.
exception is below.
Yeah. Yep.
Then you maybe have to
Oh, add flora at the end too.
add flora to the 2 more times than it's mentioned in the.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question on N. So no person can swim. There's a place that I believe the town is in charge of in Noank. At the bottom of the hill beyond the Baptist church, there's a little dock down there.
Yes, there are places where you can swim, but again, I'm assuming that it's somewhere. It's in the. Shall take into any firearms.
Maybe we should add that.
Unless
phrase after-
specifically allowed
Right.
or stated or, clearly marked or something.
Yeah, unless allowed in the management plan, I think.
Or except in locations where permission is clearly marked.
For instance, the town has in Noank, just down the road from it, there's a place I call Corkscrew Hill. And there is a walkway that goes down to a very tiny beach that the locals and the teenagers know about in the summer and access it and then swim. So when it says no town space can you swim at, other than like Esker Point, which is formalized, I wondered if this ordinance is going to prevent that if we acquire any other shoreline properties as open space in the future.
Well, I think we talked about adding unless authorized in the management plan, because it's
Yes.
purpose specific.
I'll add that in there.
'Cause isn't there also a place at Bluff Point where people can swim
Yes,
right when you get in there?
there's several places.
Maybe people aren't supposed to. Maybe they just do by habit.
No, there's signs posted and people
Yeah.
are out there.
The sign postage at Bluff Point simply
Yeah.
says no lifeguard,
Yeah.
on your own.
I think in the coastal, if I remember correctly, in the coastal the maps and stuff for the town that identify the coastal access points, that the swimming locations that we've talked about here in Noank and are identified in that map and plan.
All right, so are you gonna add that to N, Tom?
Yeah, I'll come up with words for both N for November and paragraph and tango, the T here also for both the dogs.
Okay, all right, keep on chugging.
Okay, I think we're done with that page, and I'll go on to finish up the last of the restrictions here. Ice skating and fireworks.
What's the problem with ice skating?
It's not, it's unless permitted in the management plan again.
Yeah, they got the words unless permitted in the management plan in Y here. That's the kind of words that we need to make sure it's in those other areas also.
But Bray, this is Michelle. So Bray, you were asking, what's the problem with ice skating in general on any of the places? Was that your question?
Yes.
And liability would be one thing, wouldn't it?
There's there's liability and there's the people cutting new trails and who knows what you're walking on to get to the ice.
The only place I know of where there's ice skating routinely happening is at Haley, at the corner of Brook Street and
Right, yep, they do ice skate there. Of course, they haven't in the last couple of years because they haven't had ice.
right.
But it used to be a lot of ice skating there.
Yeah.
But that's state property, yeah.
DB Pond is a very popular ice skating. Pickup hockey games is one. At Pequot Woods, there is a pond that has always been in discussion for winter use for ice skating, but unfortunately it has gotten really, we've had very few years where it's cold enough there for it to freeze. And the other problem is in the invasion of emergent plants, pond lilies and so forth. They freeze up in the ice and make it very difficult to ice skate. But that was, for Pequot Woods, for instance, that's one of the things where we're looking for people to feel comfortable for year-round use. Well, what would you do in the wintertime? Well, you might ice skate. And then we try to dredge the pond, and et cetera, et cetera. But that's, I could see where you would say, if you would say in the ordinance, no ice skating, but in the management plan, unless permitted by management plan, let's say, that covers the bases.
Yeah, and these are the words I need to bring up. That's why I come up before I started typing on those other ones. I wanted to use. I knew that these were in here, so we'll highlight those words for those other areas.
I like this one of parachuting from or onto open space land. I didn't realize that we had people doing that.
I don't know, people do everything.
And I didn't know we had a spot in open space for hang gliding, base jumping.
Yeah, I don't think we have high enough hills, but that's okay.
Well, if we want to take it out, I can, but I was surprised to see it there too. But,
We need that one. That doesn't really apply to us.
it does seem kind of
There's no harm in just leaving it there just in case. I mean, someone might decide to jump off a tree or something.
I
It's
think
not bothering anybody.
this is, I think the words give people the idea that they might want to try it just to, what I would get rid of it.
So I'm here to get rid of. 'Cause-
Kristen said keep, so you got some of each.
I don't care much. It just seems like you never know how people can get inventive about things. There are some cliffs in some of those parks, but I don't think they're very optimal.
No.
All right, so let's do a show of hands. Raise your hand if you want to keep the language in DD.
Okay, but
3, 4, it carries 4 to
Two.
Okay,
4 to 2. 4 to 2.
Okay, so it stays. So
but if people start doing it because they read this, I'm gonna blame you four guys.
You got it. I don't want to see you doing it either.
Won't be me.
Okay, permits.
I think the sense here is you can't do anything without a permit if it's more than the stated use cases. So
Right.
yeah, so I think having the option to do that makes sense. I mean, we do. I know on the state property they run track meets and all those kind of things. I'm assuming that they get a permit from the state when they do that. I hope so, but they should.
So this is Michelle. So it's not just whether it requires, because it's not just requires a permit, or if like it says you're not allowed to do it, but you could potentially get a permit to do it. So it's not just stuff that requires a permit, but the stuff that's restricted, right?
Well, I don't think there's anything that we listed above that said if you want to request a permit to do this, like the Paris sale, just says no, but
One of the questions that pops up with me when I look at the whole permitting process here is that somebody has to be looking out that people are not getting permits. And who's going to be policing all these activities? The other is, how is it that when people pull up to go for a walk on a piece of open space property, they see the trailhead, they see a few signs, maybe something related to fires, something related to dogs, and then they go. They are not going to take time to read through all the do's and don'ts. At least I don't. And the only place that I've ever seen around here that has the full-blown Monty for do's and don'ts is Bluff Point. And they put it in there years and years ago. And I do not see anybody ever reading that big bulletin board with all those do's and don'ts on here. So it's nice to have to say, okay, permits for certain large-scale activities, I think that's what we're basically looking at. If you have more than one or two people that are out there, somehow the people have to know where to go and get that permit for doing that activity. And then if you don't get the permit, somebody's going to come back and back at you. And I don't know what the fines are, you know, what's the repercussions on this if you don't follow the ordinance? And
Well, that's 12.210. We didn't get there. So I think A in this thing kind of sets the stage.
Right. So this is my, Michelle, this is my point with A. For instance, say it's a really cold year and there's the water freeze is really good and some group wants to have a fundraiser for ice skating. And even though the management plan doesn't allow ice skating for that property, maybe that one occurrence, it's okay to get a permit for that property for ice skating. So,
Right. Yes.
So what I'm saying is that there should be some kind of wording that says that it's not just, right now it just says the demand for which either this ordinance or the land management plan specifically requires a permit. What I'm saying is there could be places that don't say it requires a permit, but it's normally not allowed, but they give it a permit to be allowed.
Making exceptions to the regulations.
Or exceptions
noted
to
in
the, to whatever 2.2-5 is called, right?
Right.
All right, I think that's the intent of this section. If it doesn't, it's not clear to you, then maybe there's some additional verbiage, but I think that was the intent.
No, yeah, but if I'm the person following the letter of the law with this thing, I would only give permits when it says that this thing requires a permit. But if it doesn't say a permit or not, then I can't give them a permit. If it says nobody's allowed to do this, then I can't give somebody a permit to do it.
Right. And I agree with you that I should put allow that that the permitting process should allow exceptions to the regulations noted in section 12.2.5.
Right.
So I'll put those words in there. I think that's a good catch.
One other consideration is Pequot Woods had a formal request to do some research, archaeological research on the property. It was blessed by the town and the project went ahead. The management group for Pequot Woods had absolutely no idea that all of that transpired, and the Park and Rec Department had absolutely no idea that this was going on. It was all done through the town council. They took the application from the researcher and they said, yeah, go ahead and do it. And it was never brought before the Board of Trustees of Pequot Woods. So hopefully we're going to, with this ordinance, it's going to not allow that sort of happen, but there's going to be more transparency, if you will.
I would agree with that it should have gone through the process so the town council theoretically can overrule anything. But they should have been notified, right? And be able to take a position on it.
Right. Because the members of the Pequot Woods Board of Trustees saw activities out there. So we immediately said, oh, Parks and Rec, you're the one who's doing the trail maintenance out here and doing the tree cutting and so forth. You should know. And they did not. And we went to the planning department and we said, at this time it was Deb Jones. Hey, what's going on? Planning department had no idea. And it turns out a year or two later, we found out that the had gone through, and it was in the minutes of the town council, but it never got out to those who, we weren't against it when we found out later and what they were doing, but it was one to say, up front, it would have been nice to let us know. So I'm hoping that this sort of permitting process will.
All right, I think it should. Any other comments on 12.2.6?
Okay, moving along.
Yeah, liability. Gotta love liabilities. Okay. My next comment is on 12.2.10.
Okay. And I think this is all pretty lawyerly.
Yeah, yeah. It's all the limits of liability. I mean, that's always the last thing on any contract.
Okay.
All right, my comment on 12.2.10 was, I don't know what the state infraction schedule is or higher, which means we're going to put something. So I think earlier there was a discussion on what the hell's the penalty if somebody doesn't do it. So I think we should be specific on it. If there's something in the state that does it, or do we just make it punitive? It says, it's $1,000 per incident or something. I mean, that's punitive. I don't know, but I think we should say something.
Well, that's the kind I think the town of Cheshire rolled to the state infraction schedule. I don't know what that is myself, but I think this is an area that we'll let the lawyers take a look at. Bruce, I don't know.
Yeah, there's no reference there. Yeah, there's no reference there, but because the earlier one.
No, the state infraction schedule is a document that you can tie to as part of that's up. It's the state general statutes talk to fines establishment, and they delegate that to, I think it's the Office of Management comes up with the schedule. And Bruce, the reason I was asking Bruce was that for a violation of the plastic bags ban, where did you guys go for the fines for that?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. So I didn't find an infraction schedule like that, but I just tied it to the state ordinance that allows municipalities for fine for violations. There's one code that does that, and it's probably in the bottom of the plastics ordinance that we could take out of there and just insert into this.
Bruce, does this just apply to state property within the town? Or how is it that,
Okay. Hey guys, I found it. $35 per incident. Pretty much. They got everything in there. There's like 30 items in there, but they're all down to $35 except littering and violation of agricultural licensing requirements. And that's 125. So the maximum one's 125 bucks.
What's the statute number on that? Does it say?
Statute is Chart A, State of Connecticut Superior Court. It's their I guess that's what it is. It's a standalone document. Centralized Infractions Bureau, effective October 1st, 2019. By the Judicial Branch, State of Connecticut. Want me to send it to you, Bruce?
Yeah, sure. I use something else for the plastic ordinance. That fine's 150, so it's outside of that schedule.
Just to reflect the proper terminology here for state infractions.
All right, I'll copy you on it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, it's out there.
can I ask, Tom, what is the monetary infractions that GOSA has?
GOSA has nothing. They just tell people it's shame.
Shame. Shame. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
okay. Now,
Avalonians know it the same way unless they take the person to court.
well, then you could say damages. You've done damages to the property and sue them in civil court.
Right.
Now, what this says is, or we could have an ordinance that has a higher number than what the state has. But anyway, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know that was an actual document. I should have looked it up before. I did find it. It is in there. And there's lots and lots and lots of specific items. Like I said, there's only three or four different ones. $35, 120.
I'll ask the question to Mark Berry. What does he do about the parks properties? When there's a violation? Does he is he using the same list that Tom mentioned here?
I do not know.
Because I agree that there ought to be something in here that has a little teeth to it to say, okay, if you mess up on this, this is what the infraction is going to cost you.
But I think we also have to put it in perspective that this is, relatively speaking, a low impact type of thing. If somebody's, polluting or whatever, there's other laws in place that would control it. This is really more of a parking violation type of thing.
No, it's under the section Forest and Parks, section 23 of this document I just sent you. And you're right, they're very specific things that relate to the restrictions that are up in this document. Right, and a bunch more, right? Leaving a fire unattended it's a lot of stuff in here. But it covers every restriction that was in the document by my quick scan.
Yeah.
Including you can't gamble. There you go. Okay. All right. I think we've gone through this. So I think the action, Tom, is we'll get the updates. I will need a vote here, by the way, folks. I'll look for a motion. Then based upon that update is forwarded to Mark Berry for as a formal request for his review and comments.
What I'd recommend is, because I can't get everything in here real time, is that, and because our next meeting isn't that far away, let me put all this together, send it out as part of the package, and then we vote on it at our next regular meeting. So that way you see where all the changes are, because there's a bunch of stuff in here that I need to change rather than voting tonight.
All right, Bruce, you want to put it on the agenda for our next meeting?
I'll do that. I just put the note down.
All right.
It'll be in there. Tom, just send me the revision.
Yeah, I'll have it to you. Just give me a day or two to get this together, and then because you need this stuff up for the next package by a week from tonight, right?
Yeah, by next Thursday morning will be the deadline.
Next Thursday morning. Okay, I will definitely have this out. Probably, if not by tomorrow, it'll be Saturday. But I just want to verify and double check everything so that we have it correct, because there's a number of items in here that I have to verify.
Sure, and if there are any quick things you want to ask Mark before you finalize it, I'm sure he'd get back to you.
Yeah, okay.
With the fees and things like that.
Sure.
All right. Now the second major topic was on the stewardship plan content itself. That's a fairly large document. I think I'm safe in saying we're not going to get through it tonight. But I would like to start off with a generic comment first, that it's got a lot of stuff in there. Most of it is an example of a plan. And I think, my recommendation would be that we create a template or an outline or a workbook that says, here are all the elements that should be in the plan. We could then add at the back, oh, by the way, here's an example of one that contains all these things. But I think there's two different pieces of this. Now, when I think back about what we're creating, we've got the open space conservation plan. We've got the user manual for the economic value model. Similarly, we'd have a workbook so we're coming up with a set of documents that are for the, from the commission. To me, this is part of that package. But that would be my first suggestion in terms of the objective here. And I'd like to throw it out to say we got agreement on our overall objective on how this looks, rather than trying to dig into the nitty gritty, out of the chute. So I've thrown it out there. I'm looking for comments back from folks.
Just for why when I put this thing, I drafted this up and I did not have the whole text team involved at the time, back as a revision to one of the plans. We basically shelved it in the development time back in the May timeframe. And then I recreated it based on our last meeting here. And I really trimmed it up and cut it down a bunch. But I still left your specific comment relative to the appendix in here in regard to management plans. The reason I had put the entire management plan in here was that this is, a best practice that's by the Land Trust Alliance, who does the accreditation of land trusts from both private as well as municipal holders. So in theory, the Groton could apply, Groton, the town of Groton could apply to get accredited as a land trust for its open space properties. And as such, you'd be, need to follow their guidelines. GOSA, Avalonia is accredited. GOSA has made a statement that we will follow, has a policy statement that says we will follow the LTA guidelines. And so they are in the, but they are not accredited because it's an expensive process to go through. And you have to kind of balance that with what are you gaining from the accreditation. A lot of times the reason for the accreditation is to provide insight to donors in regard to how you're managing it, or to the general public and how well you're managing it. And in the town where municipalities have gotten accredited and such, I know the one I talked to the people out in Boulder, Colorado, when I actually attended the LTA national thing with GOSA back in 2017, because they were recognized as the nation's best volunteer land trust, even though they weren't accredited, but their processes were put in place, and they received an award for that. But when talking to the folks out in Boulder, they have over 40,000 acres that the town owns. Okay, wow. And so from their aspect, because of the size of the amount of area that they want to make sure that they're managing it properly and to give confidence to the public, that's the reason they're accredited. Okay, so there's different reasons to go different ways. And so the plan that GOSA has put together, they actually had had gotten a grant and worked with this Hunter Brawley as a professional guy that develops these land management plans. And so that's what's in here is just to give you an example of what's expected for the local area here that would meet the accreditation criteria. So relatively speaking, we can come, this is like the best, the high bar. If we want to try to go over that, that's fine. If we want to go under it, it's fine. But I just wanted to let you know the background of why some stuff's here and why I gave you the entire thing to cut and paste from. So if you want to get rid of specifics and not have like the sheep farm example, I have no problem with that. And I think, but I would recommend that we still have a template in here like Larry was suggesting. I hope that background helps everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with an example, but to me, it's an example. The template says, here are the things, that you need to then address, which could be extracted from the example, by the way. So to kind of make, because remember, we're going to give this to the town to execute. And I wanted to be more specific. And I came at this from, if I was going to execute it, what am I executing? So that's why I kind of use the word workbook or something to give them a tool to create something that would look like the example from, the sheep farm, but simplify. I mean, and I did do a lot of cutting and pasting and send it back to you, Tom. I didn't want to go through here, but I just want to get a sense of the commission on the approach to the document. So other comments, inputs?
Yep, this is Michelle. I definitely think that we should have a template so that the Parks and Rec can take it and fill in the blanks.
All right, Bray?
I would suggest also a template, but instead of us going out and recreating the wheel, to take maybe a template from one of our local organizations like either Avalonia or GOSA or both, and just to see what their templates look like, because there may be items in there that we're not aware of that should be in there, or we might find other items that just don't apply for what our future plans are for each property. To go forward is, in other words, get copies of those and let us take a look at them and then go ahead and pick out from the list what we think is our best for our own personal list, if you will, and then do a comparison.
All right, Kristen?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think what you and Michelle and Bray have said is all appropriate.
Ann?
Yep, I agree. Be
Okay.
good to review the plans and come up with a template.
So, I mean, I'm trying to think of the interest in time. I mean, I took the GOSA sheep farm one and I tried to create a template from it. I don't know how successful I was to simplify it, to give that kind of thing. And that's the one I sent Tom. I think it might be appropriate for somebody to take Avalone or some other one and do that. And then we can mush them together to get, you know, the best kind of template. Is that something that, I'm trying to think, Tom, of how to provide the most support to get this done?
What I would propose here, if you want to assign it to the text team, and then as long as Ann and Kristen are willing, we can, you know, I don't have access to the Avalone ones, but I can try to get those and to have a comparison one. So we're just not using the one from Groton Open Space. Or we can go to other, there's not a lot of these things posted I haven't found, but because most of these are pretty close, it's just not information that they want all out there because there's so much to them because they're so big. The documents tend to get fairly massive. You know, just say like this one's 50 pages here. Just what
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I see that. Well, I don't know.
I have no problem as far as, you know, just giving us an action item to turn Appendix A into a template, and we can do that as a team to do that. And I don't know if I received you emails in regard to what you're talking about with your. I don't know if I actually got a document from you.
Yeah, no, there's a document. I'll send it to you again. I attempted to create a template from that.
Yeah.
So I'll send it again. Hold on.
Okay.
No, this is Michelle. Oh, Bray, you might be able to get Avalonia, but LTA might. I can't remember when we were doing the LTA accreditation if they actually had the template or not, but I would suspect they would.
Oh, I know what happened. I had to convert it to a PDF because it was too big.
Okay.
But I think I thought I sent you the PDF. Let me go double check.
I can contact Avalonia and see what they have.
When I went to the LTA website, I couldn't get to the specifics because some of it is member only stuff and it's just coming from the general public. I wasn't able to find, you know, they post the stuff about the general stuff, but not the detailed template and stuff.
I'll take a look with my files left over from when I was president and see if I can find anything.
Okay.
But Bray might be able to get somebody to give it to him before I can find it.
Yeah.
All right. I sent it out again, Tom.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
I think given that discussion, we're now an hour and a half in. I would like to maybe go through the rest of the agenda, and I think we could wrap this up if people don't object to shorter versus
Get ready to move to adjourn, so finish your agenda.
All right. The next one is the report of the chair. So there's a number of things going on. There's a subcommittee we put together. We need a better name here for this, Kristen. It's like the community outreach or communications program, where we agreed last meeting that how do we get our message out in snippets, if you will. And there was a document that was presented on last week in the agenda package. So the activities, we've had a couple of meetings, and just a quick status. I've talked to Mark Barry in Parks and Rec. He supports the approach. I've talked to the town in terms of access. So rather than going in all details, let me tell you the net. The net was that as the Conservation Commission we already have a playlist in the Groton Management TV environment. We can create a second playlist, a sub playlist that would be devoted to this set of, whether they're videos or whether they're short PowerPoint presentations, something, whatever those mechanisms are, we could put those in a separate sub playlist, reference back and forth, all right? And also, I've got agreement from Mark Berry that we would then be able to insert those pieces into the Facebook account for Parks and Recs, which has, Tom, to your point, they have 5,700 reviewers, right? Versus you said only 5 people looked at ours, which
Well,
I agree.
It doesn't have looked at ours.
Okay, but the point is that there's a lot, they've got a pretty good sense. There's also the senior center also has a Facebook page. So I think, and so he's agreed that as we come out with things that they would, link and cross-reference that back to our site and or put our little snippet in their Facebook page, and then you can go back and get the rest of them. So I think as we work through from a mechanical point of view, I think we've got a way of getting these out. All right. Sean Greeley is also would support us if we needed some more professional video takes, like, if we were going to do a short presentation and, Tom was going to go do something, we can go down to the library. He would then set it up, do all the recordings, and bang, we would have a video created for that. So there's a number of resources that I think that are in place. So that's one. The other one, I sent Tom a note earlier today, I think, is that one of the things we don't have is that there's 1,000 characters, there's 5,000 characters or 1,000 word placeholder in those playlists that we could write up that says, here's the conservation, I'd say CC, and sorry about that, and be able to introduce these snippets that we have, it's kind of just a lead in, and then go over to the snippet itself. So I think that, there's a way to intro that, and we need to do that. The other thing is, we did have an agreement at our subcommittee to create a short one, a trial balloon, if you will, on the use of the trails, the trail systems and open space for the psychological health of the citizens of the town. So that's going to be, coming up in a couple of weeks. I don't know if we can make the next meeting, Kristen. I'm trying to remember the timeline.
No, I thought she said she needed a week to get it done.
Yeah, a week to get it done. So we may or may not have it at the next meeting. So we'll see what happens, to have an example of what this is so you guys can go see it. And the other thing that we had talked about as a subcommittee was to have a booklet for trails, right? And I did talk with Mark Berry today, and we talked about creating a document, and he was very supportive of it, that has not just the town properties, but also all the open space trails within the community, including GOSA, right, the Avalonia, et cetera, and to work out a common, I guess, lexicon on how we show the trails, get the trails. What I volunteered, I probably should ask your support, that what they do is, create a, like a trifold, right, page that has the 2 folds open, and you got the trail, you got the 1 fold that has some text. And the text would have information that says whether it's directions on how to get there, whether there's some things of historical value, whatever information that would be there. And I said that if the Parks and Recs would take the lead on getting the trail package together, that the Conservation Commission can support, that last panel to be able to do something, for each of them. And since this is an electronic document, we can kind of continue to change it or add to it or roll it out over time. So I guess before we move any further, I should probably ask for your agreement that that's an appropriate project, to go forward on in terms of the trail. I'm sorry, and he would do that with the Trails Task Force, by the way, to be able to put the whole package together and get the trails in there and then integrate whatever text we would want to add to that. Comments? Tom?
Okay, I guess I understand where we're going now a little bit better with what you're saying in regard to the playlist and stuff. But then you turned over to this trails. Are you looking to, this is an expansion, because I go online to the GIS site and I see what the town is keeping track as far as Groton trails. And and they have a little Groton trail logo on it for these are the trails that the town is supporting and emphasizing, okay? So are you trying to expand upon that with this trifold stuff, or?
Well, it's an expansion from the town-owned trails to town of Groton trails. So it's just
These
creating.
already have, they already have, it says they already have GOSA trails on here.
No, they do not have all the trails on it. I just went over it with Mark today. We went online. They do not have all the trails.
I agree they don't have all the trails, but they have more than just the town trails. That's why I'm a little confused. And this did not come up at the Trails Task Force when I attended with Michelle last week. But I guess I'm just getting a little kind of scratching my head where this is all going and what our role as the Conservation Commission is in this. So is this trying to improve on what's already here or to expand on it?
Hold on.
Can I speak as Kristen? I think the thing is that we have this big, heavy document, the open space plan, and that we're trying to distill it down, simplify, clarify for much more general public consumption. The idea of advocating and publicizing for the value of open space. The more people believe open space is valuable, the more you're able to generate, taxes, pay for more open space. So the idea is just to make it accessible in a format that people use now. And people now, a simple trifold brochure or something is something that could be at the library that people could pick up wherever, and maybe some kind of an app but the idea is just publicity in a format that people access, which is Instagram, Facebook. It's not, downloading PowerPoints from the town website. So the whole concept, and this Becky is really going to work with us on it, is just communicating the way people communicate now. So that's the goal.
Yeah, but let me go back and apply it to Tom's question, which was, there's a number of things we're going to do. We talked about you're going to get in a week or two, an actual video which talks about the psychology benefits of open space. From the trails point of view, is because I couldn't find a single place that has all the trails, the place that I could download and print out a copy that I can carry with me into the woods versus this virtual online one, which is kind of tough to use. The point of having the two improvements, which, like I said, Mark very agreed to support. One is to get all of the town of Groton trails in a single place. And number two is provide one panel where we can add information to Kristen's point. So on that panel, we can put value statements from our conservation plan that says, in this, for example, maybe we could have Bray on one of the properties that, say, here's some historical places and then, that you can go see when you're on this trail and do a little snippet. We're talking a little small stuff, right? That here was was the Indian fort, or here was put a little marker on the trail document. Or one of the things, in some of the properties have a lot of wetlands. So we take some of the economic value statements out of the wetlands and go, did you know that wetlands contribute or save the town, $100,000 a year in reduced water treatment costs that we would have to have if we didn't have that wetlands, right? And so those are the kind of things, to Kristen's point, that we can take from our conservation plan, put it in an avenue and a channel that people use and look at and go, aha, and really small snippets, in addition to the videos that we talked about. So that was the concept, Tom, that was behind that thought, right?
I think we need to get Becky over here to explain her vision, of how these things play out, of getting, just really trying to get community interaction, having a place where people can, submit their own photos that they took. It's really just to celebrate and communicate about open space and learn, an educational site as much as anything.
Yep. And we'll get that opportunity when she has her example. It'll be easier to work from an example, I think. Michelle, you're on the Trails Task Force.
Right. So and this is my biggest concern. Every time you guys bring this up, you talk about the Trails Task Force as it's a group of people that's actually going to do something. And my experience with Trails Task Force is exactly the opposite of that. It's people representing different organizations that come and report to Mark, here's what the organization's doing. But it's not like there's going to be a group of people on there that's going to take what you would suggest and do anything with it. Mark might do it, but the Trails Task Force won't.
No, Mark said that he would, get that done because it's something that Parks and Recs would support.
I'm not disagreeing with that. If Mark wants to do it with his group, that's fine. But I think the people that have not been at a Trails Task Force meeting have a misconception about what that task force is.
Okay.
They don't, as a group, they meet every 3 months. They don't do anything as a group except for those 4 meetings a year. And it's basically a person from each of the committee or each of the groups that has some interest in trails telling the rest of the group what their group has been doing. That's what the task force does.
Okay.
Now, in the past, they might have, and Bri, I know you've done it for a longer time, so you can go next. But in the past, they may have done something, but I haven't seen them as a group do anything.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
Having attended many meetings of the task force, I agree with Michelle that it's not a group of people who produce product, but rather it's to the benefit of Mark Berry and the Parks and Rec to get input from use of open space, use of the trail system. And there's different players that come to these meetings, the land trusts, the town, ledgered representatives for Tri-Town, 3 different towns, north, south, course, and so forth. But one of the outgrowths of it was that a number of years ago, we said that we want more people to walk the trails, but the problem is people don't know about it. We need to publicize maps. And through Mark and Sylvie before him, Parks and Rec Department have been developing these maps, and they're getting better at it. One of the things that I was trying to hope for also was having a repository for additional information on a particular property that you might walk. Interesting tidbits that Larry was mentioning.
That's a Facebook page. That's exactly what that is.
Right. But so on the Trails Task Force, I mentioned this a number of years ago, and Mark agreed that, for instance, over the years on Trails Day in June, the Conservation Commission has led walks on a variety of different town properties. And we get a number of people, a small number, but we get people that do come. The problem is that you've walked it and you know the trail, you don't know anything else about it. And you need to have a little history of the property, little stories about what's transpired on this property, protected and so forth. And you have to go out on your own to find that history, to put it together. And the problem is, once you get it, there's no repository. In other words, I make up notes, I do the walk, and my notes just eventually disappear somewhere in the stack of paper. So from that standpoint, I like on the idea of the trifold. I like where it has some information on it. At Bluff Point, I worked with the state of Connecticut and we produced brochures, map brochures. The state ran out of money producing them, and so there haven't been any at Bluff Point now for a number of years. But it was one where the center was the map of the property, and we picked out a variety of different interesting stops along the way to make your trip interesting. And then there was a little short dialogue about each one of those little things. And again, that means that somebody has to sit down and pull all that history together, have an idea of what's out there, and then go ahead and research it. But the Trails Task Force, they're not the end all to produce this sort of thing. And Mark Berry certainly supports any efforts that someone could make. It's just we don't have the structure where we could take on a particular property, find this information, submit it, have it saved, and then if somebody wants to make a brochure or pull some facts out of it to make a trifold, that information is there, and it's also available to the public, like on Facebook or some other social media. So I'm not sure where that leaves us.
But I think if we're going to have management plans for these properties, the management plan would have, if you look at the example, it has that kind of stuff in it. It has some of the history, has a lot of that data in it, which would become a repository, but not the communications out. In other words, how many people are going to read this 30 or 40 page document from GOSA on that property? It's not consumable. So I think we're all talking around the same thing. There's a difference between the delivery channel and the content. And Mark agreed to coordinate the trail content and get standardization. I was just proposing that, and I guess I'll pose it as extracts from management plans to provide interesting tidbits and extracts from our conservation plan to be able to put it in this extra space. It's going to be electronic, right? So some of the pieces can be then directed to from Facebook. Some of the, the same information, it gets reused once it's electronic. So that's the report from the subcommittee. Michelle?
Right, this is Michelle. So I agree the concept is really good. The devil's in the details. Someone has to create the information that goes in the management plan that you then want to extract. And I don't know, I mean, if you have to find a volunteer to do it, or you have to pay somebody to do it. So when I was talking to just decide that now, but Avalonia paid lots of money for people to develop their management plan, their stewardship plans for the major properties. So someone has to either pay for or do an amazing amount of work to get the kind of details you're talking about. And you might find someone that's willing to do it, but I just want to give a heads up that it's not like that's not the easy part of this. That's the hardest part of this. Is to actually get the data for you to publish.
It's Kristen. I mean, the management plan and the publicizing open space, those are two different animals, I think. Those are two different, I mean, the management plan is going to evolve through work that we're doing, and this publicity thing is a separate, like, it's not the same thing.
Well, but Larry was talking about extracting things from the management plan to put in the data. What I'm saying is to get it in the management plan exists,
right. If the management plan exists. Now, to your point, Michelle, I did ask the town that there's 4 candidates, which they're still futzing with. There's 4 candidates for the open position. So I said, well, if you got 4 candidates, why don't we use those people as volunteers, Michelle, to do stuff, since they're saying they're going to volunteer to do stuff. So John Reiner agreed to go talk to each of the 4 while they're still futzing around trying to figure out who's on it, to say, are you willing to do some work? These are the kind of things that we can get people signed up to do. All right.
That sounds like a great plan.
So that's probably where we go. Now, I did mention Bray. I said, gee, I know somebody that every time I ask a question on history, he seems to know the answer. I think that was you. So, so we'll capture forever. Next time you do write your thoughts down, then we want to capture it forever, Bray. How's that?
Right.
Okay. So to wrap this up, since we're getting to the end of our second hour here, is that was the end of my report of chair. Is there a consensus for the subcommittee to continue those efforts, or
Sure.
does someone want to raise an objection or do a change in direction?
Mrs. Olson, the only comment I have is, did we actually, if I go back through the notes, did we actually establish this subcommittee like we have the text team?
Yeah, yes, we did last meeting.
Yes.
At the last meeting, so that was established. Okay.
Yep, I
Yes.
made sure we did that, following parliamentary procedure. All right, without objection, then we will continue to pursue this path and report back. And as we get through this, if there's somebody just to pick a name out of the air, like we want to call on Bray for specific information, then we'll go do that in the future. So the next item on the agenda is report of staff. Bruce.
Yeah, well, we are getting some comments in on the plan of conservation. And we got our finalized comments from the Planning and Zoning Commission on Tuesday night this week. Instead of having them vote as an entire group, it was just 2 individuals that provided their own comments, and they decided to submit them that way. So, and we are also just finishing up our comments. We were going to have them in the packet for you next, well, I guess in your October meeting. So I guess the question to everyone is, how would you like to receive the comments? Do you want to see them, comprehensively in the next packet? Do you want them to kind of trickle in as they come, finalize here? I was kind of leaning towards just putting everything in the next packet and, getting it out middle of next week and discussing it, in October. That's okay.
I'm okay with that. Tom?
Yep, I'm okay with it.
That's fine.
Yep. I'm okay.
All right. Well, we'll see. I guess we'll see what they look like. So, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
All the comments we had today was the document's too big, but we'll see what these guys come back with.
No, our staff comments, we spent a lot of time on it. We went through and, everything from typos to, maybe this phrase could be changed a little bit to better incorporate the POCD and things like that. So we have a bolded list, comment on page, 15 on this, and yeah.
Great.
All right, that's good.
Yeah.
Dude, somebody read it.
Yeah, we all read it. It's a little long. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. The next item on the agenda is adjournment. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
I'm sorry, did I hear a motion to adjourn?
No, you didn't.
Michelle first, Kristen had her hand up.
Second.
With a second. All in favor of adjournment, raise their
Aye.
hands.
Aye.
All right, all opposed, all negative. It's passed unanimously. We're adjourned.
All right.
Yay.
Bye, everybody.
In a couple weeks.
See you soon.
See you in a couple of weeks. Yep.